The altitude made breathing hard. 8,000 feet above sea level, where the air was thin and cold, even in summer, where every breath felt like inhaling knives. Colonel David Mitchell had been awake for 72 hours straight. His position was a pile of rocks on a ridgeline that overlooked Firebase Viper.
Hang in there, I've almost
Below,
got it.
200 Taliban
Inside.
fighters had surrounded 12 Navy SEALs who were about to die. The firebase had been overrun. Communications were down. No air support was coming. The nearest quick reaction force was 4 hours away by helicopter. 4 hours these men didn't have. Colonel Mitchell pressed his eye to the scope of his M14 rifle, the same rifle he'd carried through Desert Storm in 1991, the same rifle that had saved his life in Fallujah in 2004. The wood stock was worn smooth by 17 years of his hands. The barrel showed honest use, character earned through combat. Through the scope, he could see the enemy sniper, 1,200 yards downrange, a speck of darker shadow against gray rock. The man had killed 4 SEALs already, was lining up his 5th shot. Colonel Mitchell's spotter whispered beside him. Wind shifting, 15 miles per hour from the east. Variable gusts to 25. Thermals are rising from the valley. Temperature 115 degrees. David Mitchell didn't need the information. He could feel it. The wind on his face. The heat rising from the rocks. The way the air moved in layers. Streams of force flowing at different altitudes like invisible rivers. He made his calculations in 2 seconds. Not conscious math, just instinct built from 20,000 hours of practice. Range, 1,200 yards. Wind, 15 miles per hour crosswind, gusting to 25. That meant 18.5 minutes of angle left, maybe 20 during the gusts. Elevation, 463 minutes of angle. Bullet drop at this distance was 38 feet, higher than a 3-story building. Temperature, 115 degrees. Thin air at altitude, hot air rising from valley floor creating thermals. Bullet would fly faster, flatter, add 2 minutes of angle. He adjusted his point of aim, breathed in for 4 heartbeats, out for 4 heartbeats, natural pause for 2 heartbeats. When the body was stillest, when the rifle was steadiest, his finger touched the trigger, not a pull, a squeeze, so gentle it seemed to surprise him when the M14 roared. The recoil drove into his shoulder. Honest force, physics and Newton's laws expressing themselves through wood and steel. 4.2 seconds of flight time. Colonel Mitchell didn't blink. Watched through the scope as the bullet crossed 1,200 yards of mountain air. Watched it curve left with the wind. Watched it drop 38 feet. Watched it arrive exactly where he'd known it would. The enemy sniper's head snapped back. The man dropped behind his rocks. Didn't move again. His spotter's voice crackled with disbelief. Ghost, you just saved 23 Marines. How the hell did you make that shot? Colonel David Mitchell chambered another round. His voice was calm, professional. The voice of a man who'd done this before, who'd do it again, who understood that every shot was a human life and that weight never left you. Fundamentals don't need batteries, son. Below, the Taliban fighters were repositioning, trying to flank the firebase from the east. 11 men moving through rocks and shadows, thinking they were invisible, thinking they were safe. They weren't. Colonel Mitchell fired 11 more times. 11 shots, 11 kills, ranges from 400 to 900 yards, through heat shimmer that turned the world into liquid, through mountain thermals that could push bullets off course by feet instead of inches. By the time the quick reaction force arrived 4 hours later, Firebase Viper was secure. 12 Navy SEALs were alive. 23 Marines had survived an attack that should have killed them all. The after-action report would say that Colonel David Mitchell had single-handedly broken a Taliban offensive, that his shooting had been beyond anything the U.S. military had documented in modern warfare, that he'd operated for 72 hours without sleep, without support, without anything except skill and will in the fundamentals he'd mastered over 2 decades. They would recommend him for the Medal of Honor. The paperwork would arrive 3 weeks later. After an IED outside Kandahar had turned his convoy into scrap metal and fire, after his family received a folded flag and a telegram that started with, "The Secretary of Defense regrets to inform you," after his 14-year-old daughter stood at Arlington National Cemetery and watched them lower her father into the ground. The California sun was a physical weight, 100 degrees Fahrenheit at 6 in the morning, the kind of heat that turned asphalt into mirrors and made the Pacific Ocean shimmer in the distance like a mirage. Captain Sarah Mitchell stepped out of the government sedan and felt the heat hit her like a wall. She was 29 years old, 5 feet 3 inches tall, 120 pounds in full combat gear, small enough that people constantly underestimated her. Which was fine. She'd learned to use that. Her Marine Corps dress uniform was crisp despite the heat. Ribbons gleamed across her chest in neat rows. Expert rifle marksmanship badge with 3 gold wreaths, the highest designation the Corps awarded. She'd earned every one of them. Sarah adjusted her cover and shouldered her rifle case. The case was older than she was, battered green canvas that had faded from forest to olive drab. Metal clasps tarnished with age and salt air. Worn handles wrapped with friction tape that her father had applied in 1991. Before she was born, before Desert Storm, before everything. Inside that case was a piece of history, a piece of her father, a piece of a war that had ended before she could remember it, but had shaped everything she'd become. Across the parking lot, Navy SEALs watched her approach. There were 15 of them clustered near the equipment shed. Conversations died as she walked closer. Some crossed their arms. Others exchanged glances that said everything their words didn't. A few didn't even try to hide their skepticism. Sarah had expected this. She'd been the first woman in every shooting competition she'd ever entered since joining the Marines 7 years ago. The doubt, the whispered comments, the barely concealed hostility masquerading as concern. It was old news. Background noise she'd learned to tune out like static. But this was different. This wasn't a local competition or even a Marine Corps championship. This was the Naval Special Warfare Command Advanced Sniper Competition, an invitation-only event where America's most elite marksmen gathered to prove who was deadliest, who was best, who deserved to be called a warrior in a world where that word had lost its meaning. And she was the first woman who'd ever qualified to attend. Sarah walked toward the main building. Every step felt deliberate, measured, like walking through water that didn't want her to pass. She could feel their eyes tracking her movement, analyzing, judging, waiting for her to fail before she'd even fired a shot. A voice cut through the tension. "Captain Mitchell." Sarah turned. A mountain of a man approached from the command post. Master Chief Frank Carson was a legend in special operations circles. 68 years old, but built like he'd been carved from California granite. Silver beard trimmed with military precision. Eyes that had seen too much combat in too many places the government didn't talk about. The Navy Cross ribbon sat prominently on his khaki uniform. Next to it, a cluster of other decorations that told stories most men couldn't bear to hear. Desert Storm, Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan. Places where young men went to become old or become ghosts. Sarah snapped a salute. Carson returned it with the casual precision of someone who'd performed the gesture 10,000 times, in 100 different countries, under fire and under peace, until it became as natural as breathing. "Master Chief." Carson studied her face, not the way the others had looked at her. This was different. He was searching for something, some quality that couldn't be measured by gender or politics, or the bureaucratic mandates that had brought her here. "Your father and I served together." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her father had never mentioned this man's name, had never talked about specific people from Desert Storm beyond generalities. The war had been something he'd carried in silence, a weight that had shaped him but never broken him. until Afghanistan had finished what Desert Storm started. Sir, he never mentioned. The best ones never do. Carson's weathered face remained impassive. Desert Storm, 1991. Your father taught me that fundamentals outlast fashion, that discipline defeats dependency, that the warrior makes the weapon deadly, not the other way around. Carson's eyes moved to the rifle case on Sarah's shoulder. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Or memory. We'll see if he taught you well, Captain. Equipment shed, 1,600 hours. Competition briefing at 1,800. You'll bunk in Building 3 tonight. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, Captain. Your father saved my life in Desert Storm. Kuwait, 1991. I was 19 years old, combat correspondent, not even supposed to be in the fighting. But when the Iraqis counterattacked, everyone fought. I was certain I was going to die in that desert, certain my mother would get a telegram and a folded flag. Carson met her eyes directly. Your father's shooting that day was the difference between me standing here and being a name on a memorial wall. I've waited 33 years to tell his daughter that. Sarah felt her throat tighten. Couldn't speak, could only nod. Carson walked away without another word. His boots crunched on the gravel, disappeared into the command post, left Sarah standing in the parking lot with the California sun hammering down and her father's rifle case suddenly feeling heavier than it had a moment before. Sarah's pulse quickened despite herself. She trained on standard-issue equipment at Quantico. Good rifles, reliable, but this was next-level gear. The kind of weapons that turned good shooters into legendary ones. The kind of equipment that gave you every advantage that American technology and taxpayer money could provide. All right, people, listen up. Master Chief Carson's voice boomed across the shed like artillery fire. 15 men turned to face him, the best snipers from every branch of the military. SEALs, Marine Scout snipers, Army Rangers, Air Force Special Operations. Each one had been selected because they represented excellence in the deadliest form of warfare. And Sarah, the only woman, the only question mark. We've got 15 competitors this year, Carson continued. Mix of services, mix of experience, but all of you are here for the same reason, to prove you're the best marksman in America's arsenal. A young SEAL with lieutenant bars stepped forward with a clipboard. He began calling out names and equipment assignments. His voice was crisp, professional. Each assignment met with satisfied nods from the recipients. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, SR-25 with Schmidt and Bender, PMI scope. A lean man with calculating eyes stepped forward. Commander Marcus Hayes, call sign, Ghost. 4 deployments to Afghanistan, 37 confirmed kills, according to the whispered stories that followed him. He accepted the rifle like it was an extension of his own body, something he'd been born knowing how to use. The scope mounted on top was worth $15,000. German glass that could see through atmospheric distortion. Laser rangefinder integrated into the reticle. Wind meter that measured crosswind velocity with scientific precision. Captain Anderson, Barrett M82A1 with Leupold Mark V HD. Staff Sergeant Park, M40A6 with Nightforce ATACR. The list continued. Each competitor received weapons that matched their skills, tools that would give them every advantage that American technology could provide. Lieutenant Stone, custom SR-25 with integrated ballistic computer and thermal optics package. A SEAL in his early 30s stepped forward with barely concealed satisfaction. Lieutenant Derek Stone, rising star in naval special warfare. He'd made no secret of his opinion that this competition should remain what it had always been. A proving ground for warriors, not a stage for political theater. Stone examined his rifle with the reverence of a craftsman receiving a masterwork. The optics package alone cost $15,000. The ballistic computer cost another $20,000. It calculated windage automatically, compensated for temperature and humidity, measured range with laser precision, even accounted for the Coriolis effect, the rotation of the Earth itself affecting bullet trajectory. The entire system had cost taxpayers $50,000. Like having a PhD in physics in every shot, Stone said to the SEAL beside him, loud enough for everyone to hear, loud enough to make his point clear. Sarah kept her face neutral, showed nothing. Her father had taught her that reaction was weakness. Emotion was ammunition you handed to your enemy. Captain Mitchell, Sarah stepped forward. Every eye in the shed turned toward her. The moment stretched, compressed, became heavy with expectation and doubt and curiosity and judgment. Master Chief Carson reached beneath the table and pulled out a battered green case that looked like it had survived a war. Because it had. The metal clasps were tarnished with age and exposure. The canvas covering was frayed and stained with decades of use and abuse. The honest wear that came from being trusted in places where trust meant survival. Carson set it on the table with a heavy thunk that echoed in the sudden silence. Your rifle, Captain. Sarah opened the case slowly. Inside, nestled in deteriorating foam that had lost its cushioning decades ago, lay an M14 battle rifle, the same platform her father had carried. The wood stock was scratched and worn smooth by countless hands. The barrel showed honest use, character earned through combat and maintained through care. And mounted on top was a scope that had clearly seen better days, better decades. The mounting bracket was bent at an angle that made it completely useless. Through the glass, Sarah could see the reticle was misaligned, twisted almost 45 degrees, shattered internal mechanisms visible through cracks in the housing. The mounting screws were stripped. The whole assembly looked like it had been dropped from a helicopter and then run over by a tank. The shed fell absolutely silent. Sarah ran her fingers along the rifle's receiver. She knew this weapon, had cleaned it, had fired it, had learned the fundamentals of marksmanship with it in the mountains of Montana, where her father had taught her that being a warrior wasn't about equipment. It was about will. It was about discipline. It was about mastering fundamentals that didn't change regardless of technology or fashion or time. This was her father's rifle, the one he'd carried through Desert Storm in February 1991, the one he'd used to save 37 Marines during the Iraqi counteroffensive, the one he'd brought home and maintained with the same care he'd given it in combat, the same ritual cleaning, the same inspection, the same respect for a tool that had kept him alive when everything else had failed. But the scope was completely unusable. Anyone could see that. The mounting screws were stripped. The internal mechanism was damaged beyond any field repair. This scope would never function properly again. Is there a problem, Captain? Carson's voice was neutral, but his eyes were challenging her, testing her. Every person in that shed was watching, waiting, expecting her to complain, to demand equal equipment, to prove she needed special treatment. Sarah examined the scope more closely. The mounting screws that weren't stripped turned easily in her fingers. She removed the damaged optic and set it aside carefully, with reverence, because even broken, it represented her father's service. Beneath the scope mount, she found what she was looking for. The rifle's original iron sights. Simple, reliable. No batteries, no glass, no technology to fail. Just steel and skill and the fundamentals that had kept warriors alive for centuries. She worked the action to ensure it functioned smoothly. The bolt moved with well-worn ease. A weapon that had been maintained by someone who understood that a rifle was more than metal and wood. It was a trust, a responsibility, a tool that deserved respect. She checked the barrel. Clean, properly maintained. Someone had cared for this rifle, even if they'd given it to her as a test. Sarah looked up at Master Chief Carson, met his eyes with absolute certainty. No problem, Master Chief. If it saved 37 Marines in Desert Storm, it's good enough for me here. Iron sights will do just fine. The shed erupted, not in approval, in disbelief. Murmurs rippled to the assembled competitors like shockwaves from an explosion. Iron sights at 600 yards against our optics? This isn't 1991. Lieutenant Stone actually laughed, a short bark of sound that carried more derision than humor. You're going to shoot iron sights against AI-assisted ballistic computers? Ma'am, with all due respect, that's suicide. You won't make it past day one. Commander Hayes studied her with renewed interest. Unlike the others, he wasn't smiling. He wasn't mocking. He was evaluating, calculating, trying to understand if she was brave or foolish or something else entirely. Master Chief Carson raised his hand. The shed fell silent immediately, the kind of silence that only came from absolute authority earned through decades of leading men in combat, through making decisions that sent warriors into hell and brought them back alive. Gentlemen, Captain Mitchell. His voice carried weight, history, truth that couldn't be argued with. We've spent millions of dollars on technology that makes you better shooters, computers that calculate what you used to have to learn, optics that see what you used to have to feel, electronics that compensate for what you used to have to master. He paused, let the words sink in like water into dry ground. But when that technology fails, and it will fail, what's left? The warrior or the machine? His eyes swept across the assembled shooters, lingered on Stone, on Hayes, on the others who carried weapons that cost more than some people earned in a year. Then he looked at Sarah. Some of us believe the warrior makes the weapon deadly. Others think it's the other way around. He picked up her father's M14, held it like it weighed nothing, like it was sacred. This rifle fought in Desert Storm in 1991, saved American lives when everything else had failed. Technology broke, radios died, modern weapons jammed, but this rifle kept working. This rifle kept killing America's enemies. This rifle brought a good man home. Carson set the rifle back in its case, closed the lid with reverence. This week we'll answer a question. Can the old ways still work? Or have we evolved past the fundamentals that forged warriors for 10,000 years? He looked at Sarah directly. Captain Mitchell is going to help us find out. You've got 30 minutes to zero your weapon on the 100-yard range before dark, Captain. I suggest you use that time wisely. Sarah lifted the rifle case, felt its weight, heavier than modern weapons, more unwieldy. But there was something honest about it, something that didn't make promises it couldn't keep. Need help figuring out how to work it? The voice came from somewhere in the back. Sarah didn't see who, didn't care. More laughter rippled through the shed. Not malicious exactly, just certain, confident. The kind of certainty that came from never having been proven wrong. Sarah walked toward the door. The M14 felt comfortable on her shoulder despite its age, despite its limitations, because limitations were only failures if you let them define you. Outside, the California sun was beginning its descent toward the Pacific. Golden light painted everything in shades that reminded Sarah of Montana, of mountains, of a father teaching his daughter that the world didn't care about your excuses, only your results. The 100-yard range stretched before her. Targets waited in neat rows, simple silhouettes against white backing. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated. Just the fundamentals of marksmanship that had defined warfare since the invention of accurate rifles. Sarah walked to the firing line, set her rifle down carefully, began her pre-shoot routine. The same one her father had taught her in the mountains when she was 12 years old. When he decided she was old enough to understand that shooting wasn't about killing, it was about discipline, control, mastery of self before mastery of weapon. Behind her, several competitors had followed outside to watch. They leaned against the shed wall, arms crossed, ready for the show, ready to see confirmation of what they already believed. Sarah ignored them, built walls in her mind, created a space where only she and the target existed, where doubt and pressure and expectation couldn't follow, where there was only breath and trigger, and the fundamental truth that marksmanship was mathematics you could feel. She loaded 5 rounds, 7.62 NATO ammunition that had been manufactured decades ago but maintained with care. Assumed a solid prone position that her body remembered from 10,000 repetitions. The Montana mountains appeared in her memory, unbidden, unwanted, but there. She was 12 years old again, her father kneeling beside her in morning frost, his voice calm and patient as he explained the fundamentals that would define her life. Shooting isn't magic, Sarah. It's physics, ballistics, mathematics expressed through steel and lead. Every bullet follows the same laws. Gravity pulls it down, wind pushes it sideways, air resistance slows it. Your job is to account for all of it, calculate it, compensate for it, make the bullet arrive exactly where you need it. His hand had adjusted her grip on the rifle. Gentle, precise. Technology is a crutch, Sarah. Learn to shoot with your heart and your head. Everything else is just decoration. Fundamentals don't need batteries. Discipline doesn't need computers. When everything fails, and it will fail, skill is all you have left. Sarah opened her eyes. The memory faded. The Montana mountains dissolved back into California heat. She aligned her iron sights on the target 100 yards downrange. The front sight post was a simple steel post. The rear sight was an aperture, a hole that created the perfect circle when aligned correctly. Together they formed a figure 8. The target sat at the top of the front post, exactly where it needed to be, floating there like a promise waiting to be kept. Sarah exhaled slowly. Let her heartbeat settle into the rhythm she'd practiced until it became unconscious. Until her pulse was something she controlled rather than something that controlled her. 4 beats per breath cycle. Inhale for 4 heartbeats. Exhale for 4 heartbeats. Natural pause for 2 heartbeats. When the body was stillest, when the rifle was steadiest, the front sight post aligned with the rear aperture, creating that perfect figure 8 that separated marksmen from shooters. The target sat at the top of her front post, exactly where it needed to be. Sarah's finger caressed the trigger. Not a pull, a squeeze. So gentle it seemed to surprise even her when the M14 roared. The recoil was solid, true, driving straight back into her shoulder with honest force. Nothing cushioned, nothing compensated. Just physics and Newton's laws expressing themselves through wood and steel. Downrange, a perfect hole appeared in the 10 ring, center mass. Sarah chambered her second round. Her movements were economical, practiced. She'd learned long ago not to rush between shots. Each one deserved its own moment, its own calculation, its own respect. The rifle's barrel had warmed slightly from that first shot, maybe 5 degrees Fahrenheit, which would affect the bullet's trajectory by mere centimeters. But at 600 yards tomorrow, centimeters would become feet, misses instead of kills, the difference between success and failure. She made an infinitesimal adjustment, shifted her point of aim by a fraction so small it was almost imaginary, compensating for barrel temperature, for the microscopic expansion of metal under heat. Then fired again. Another perfect 10-ring hit. Third shot, fourth, fifth. Each one felt correct. That indefinable sensation when everything aligned. Beth and trigger and sight picture and the universe itself seeming to hold still for that fraction of a second when the firing pin struck the primer. When all the variables collapsed into a single point of certainty. By her 5th shot, the group of spectators had grown silent. The casual mockery had evaporated like morning mist, replaced by something harder to define, something that looked almost like respect, or maybe fear. The fear that came from watching someone accomplish what you'd been certain was impossible. All 5 rounds had clustered within a 2-inch circle at center mass. Performance that matched or exceeded what the others had achieved with their advanced optics and computer-assisted calculations. Sarah stood, cleared her weapon with practiced movements that were as automatic as breathing. ejected the magazine, locked the bolt to the rear, visually inspected the chamber, the ritual of making a weapon safe, then turned back toward the shed. Master Chief Carson stood at the edge of the range now, binoculars in hand. He'd been watching through the glass, observing, measuring, searching for that quality he'd seen in her father 33 years ago in a desert that had tried to kill them both. Their eyes met across the distance. Carson nodded once, barely perceptible, then turned and walked away without a word. But that nod said everything. Commander Hayes remained, still studying her with those calculating eyes. Unlike the others, he hadn't moved, hadn't reacted, just watched and evaluated and tried to understand what he was seeing. "Where did you learn to shoot like that, Captain?" Sarah shouldered her rifle. The M14 felt like it belonged there, like it had always belonged there. "My father, Colonel David Mitchell, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, Desert Storm, 1991. He taught me that real marksmen don't need crutches, sir. They need discipline." Hayes's expression shifted. Something that might have been recognition, or memory, or respect for a name that carried weight in circles where legends were measured in confirmed kills and lives saved. "He taught you well. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." Sarah walked past him toward her assigned barracks. The evening air was cooling, the Pacific breeze carrying salt and the promise of another perfect California day tomorrow. Behind her, the sunset painted the ocean in shades of orange and red. The same ocean her father had crossed in 1990, heading toward a war that would define him, that would test whether the fundamentals he'd learned could survive contact with an enemy that wanted him dead. He'd survived, had proven the old ways worked, had brought those lessons home and passed them to his daughter with the same care he'd maintained his rifle. Now it was her turn. Sarah reached her barracks room, small but clean. Spartan in the way that military spaces always were. Function over comfort. She set her father's rifle on the rack, opened her pack. Inside, carefully wrapped in a Marine Corps flag, was the photograph she always carried. Her father in his dress blues, taken just before his deployment to Desert Storm in 1990. Young, strong, certain of purpose in a way that only came from believing absolutely in your mission. Before Afghanistan, before the IED, before Arlington. Sarah set the photograph on her footlocker, sat on her bunk, stared at the face of a man who'd taught her everything that mattered. "I did good today, Dad," she whispered to the image, to the memory, to the legacy that had brought her here. "Tomorrow, we'll see if I can keep it up." Somewhere across the compound, competitors were checking their equipment, calibrating their computers, running diagnostics on optics packages that cost more than her truck, trusting in technology to give them the edge they needed. Sarah cleaned her father's rifle, used the same techniques he'd taught her, the same care he'd shown, disassembled the bolt, cleaned the firing pin channel, swabbed the barrel, inspected every component for wear or damage. Because a weapon was more than a tool, it was a trust, a responsibility to every warrior who'd carried it before. Tomorrow would bring the real test. 600-yard precision shooting. The first time she'd have to prove that iron sights could compete with the full might of modern technology. But tonight, she'd already sent a message. Underestimate her at your own risk. Sarah lay back on her bunk. The photograph of her father watched from the footlocker, young and strong and certain, ready to face whatever came. Outside, the California night settled over Naval Special Warfare Command like a blanket. Stars appeared in the darkening sky, the same stars her father had seen in the desert 33 years ago, the same stars that had watched over warriors for 10,000 years. Before technology, before computers, before anything except skill and will, and the fundamentals that never changed. Tomorrow, Sarah would prove those fundamentals still mattered. Tonight, she slept the sleep of someone who knew exactly who she was and what she had to do. Day 2, dawn. Dawn broke over Naval Special Warfare Command with a kind of crystalline clarity that made snipers smile. Not a cloud in the sky. Minimal wind. Perfect visibility stretching for miles across the range. The kind of morning that separated good shooters from great ones. When there were no excuses, no environmental factors to blame, just skill against skill. Sarah had been awake since 0430, running through her morning routine with mechanical precision. Physical training, 3 miles at 7-minute pace. Shower, equipment check, breakfast that was pure fuel, oatmeal, eggs, black coffee, nothing that would spike her blood sugar or cloud her focus. Now, standing on the firing line at 0545, she could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on every competitor. 15 of the military's best marksmen, all gathered for one purpose, to prove they were the deadliest shooter in America's arsenal. Master Chief Carson stood at the command post, his khaki uniform already showing sweat stains from the morning heat that was building despite the early hour. Behind him, a scoreboard displayed competitor names in alphabetical order. Sarah's name sat near the top, a target waiting to be knocked down. "Gentlemen and Captain Mitchell," Carson's voice boomed across the range like artillery fire. "Welcome to day 2. Today's challenge is straightforward. 600-yard precision shooting. Moving targets, computer-controlled, variable speeds and directions. You'll have 10 targets. Each appears for exactly 3 seconds. See it, calculate, lead and drop. Engage." He paused. Let the simplicity of the task settle into their minds before adding the complications. Wind is calm at 3 miles per hour from 280 degrees. Temperature is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity at 45%. Barometric pressure is standard. Conditions are as close to perfect as you'll ever see in combat, which means there are no excuses. Your skill is the only variable that matters today. His hard eyes scanned the line of shooters. Shooters will rotate in alphabetical order by last name. Captain Anderson, you're up first. Staff Sergeant Park second. Captain Mitchell third. Perfect. Sarah would see how others perform first. Get a read on the range conditions. Watch for subtle wind patterns the flags might miss. Learn from their successes and failures before she ever touched her trigger. Captain Bradley Anderson was an Army Ranger with a reputation for cold first shots. First-round accuracy that bordered on supernatural. His rifle was a thing of beauty, a custom AR-10 with every upgrade imaginable. Free-floating barrel, match-grade trigger, custom-bedded stock, optics that could resolve a man's facial features at 1,000 yards. He assumed his position. The range fell silent except for the gentle flutter of wind flags and the distant sound of waves against the California coast. 5 shots rang out in steady succession. Professional. Controlled. Each one separated by exactly 15 seconds of breathing and recalculation. The range officer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. 4 10s, 1 9, total score 49. Solid performance. The 9 had clipped the edge of the 10 ring by maybe half an inch. Barely a miss at all. Anderson stood and nodded, satisfied but not celebrating. He knew 49 wasn't enough to win, just enough to stay in contention. Staff Sergeant James Park approached the line next. Marine Scout Sniper. 2 deployments to Afghanistan. Sarah had heard stories about his performance in Helmand Province. Shots that had saved entire patrols from ambush. Confirmed kills from ranges that seemed impossible. Park's M40A6 was equipped with Nightforce ATACR optics, military-grade glass that could punch through atmospheric distortion and heat shimmer like they didn't exist. His 5 shots came even faster than Anderson's. Confidence built on hundreds of confirmed kills. Muscle memory that didn't require conscious thought. 5 10s, perfect score 50. Murmurs of approval rippled through the competitors. Park had set the bar high, proven that perfection was possible under these conditions. Now everyone else would be chasing that standard. Captain Mitchell, you're up. Sarah walked to the firing line. Every eye followed her movement. She could hear the whispered comments even though the competitors tried to keep them low. Let's see what she's got. Iron sights at 600. This should be interesting. Probably won't even hit the target. Give her credit for trying at least. Sarah tuned them out. Years of competitions had taught her how to build walls in her mind, creating a space where only she and the target existed, where doubt and pressure and expectation couldn't follow, where there was only breath and trigger and mathematics. She set down her shooting mat, the same one her father had used, worn canvas that had absorbed the sweat and blood of 100 shooting positions. Assumed a solid prone position that her body knew better than her own heartbeat. Left leg straight, right leg bent at the knee, supporting hand under the rifle's forestock, shooting hand gripping the pistol grip with just enough pressure to control without tensing. The first target appeared at 500 yards, moving diagonally across her field of view, northeast to southwest, maybe 8 miles per hour. Sarah's mind processed variables in microseconds. Not conscious math, just instinct built from 10,000 hours of practice. Distance, 500 yards. Velocity, 8 miles per hour, means target moving roughly 12 feet per second. Time of flight at this distance, approximately 0.7 seconds. Target will travel 8 to 9 feet during flight time. Lead by approximately 3 feet given the angle. Wind 3 miles per hour from the west adds maybe 6 inches of drift. Barrel temperature cool. First shot, no compensation needed. Her front sight post led the target by what felt right. What thousands of hours of practice had burned into muscle memory. She squeezed, hit. The sensor light illuminated green, confirming what she'd felt. The shot had been perfect. Target 2 appeared at 900 yards, moving perpendicular to her position, west to east. Faster now, maybe 12 miles per hour. Longer distance meant more flight time, more lead required, more wind drift to compensate for, more variables to calculate in the fraction of a second before the target disappeared. Sarah adjusted, her breathing controlled. Fired. Hit. She moved through the sequence like flowing water, each decision happening faster than conscious thought. Each shot feeling correct before the sensor confirmed it. Target 3, 500 yards, moving toward her at an angle. Closing distance. Lead calculation complicated by the geometry. Hit. Target 4, 700 yards. Erratic movement. Speed changes. Sarah watched for half a second, identified the deceleration pattern, led it appropriately. Hit. Target 5, 600 yards. Moving fast, perpendicular, simple calculation. Hit. Target 6, 800 yards, diagonal. Hit. Target 7, 400 yards, close and fast. Hit. Target 8, 1,000 yards, moving slow but maximum distance. Hit. The 9th target appeared at maximum range, 1,000 yards, moving at maximum speed, 15 miles per hour, appearing from behind cover for only 3 seconds. This was the nightmare scenario. Maximum distance, maximum speed, minimum time. Sarah saw it appear, tracked its movement for 1 second, calculating frantically. 1,000 yards meant approximately 1.5 seconds flight time. Target moving 15 miles per hour meant 22 feet per second. During flight time, target would travel 33 feet. Lead required was massive, almost a full body length ahead of the silhouette. She aimed what felt like a full body length ahead of the target. Fired. The sensor remained dark. Miss. She'd led too far. Anticipated acceleration that hadn't happened, overcompensated for the distance. Sarah cleared her mind, refused to dwell on failure. One target remained, one chance to finish strong. The 10th target appeared at 650 yards, moving erratically, speed changes designed to fool even computer-assisted calculations, accelerating and decelerating in a pattern that seemed random. Sarah watched for 1 full second, burning precious time, but identifying the pattern, It wasn't truly random, there was rhythm. Predictability hidden in apparent chaos. The target accelerated for 2 seconds, decelerated for 1 second. Repeated. She waited for the deceleration phase, led the target accounting for its slowing speed, fired, hit. 9 hits, 1 miss. The range officer's voice carried genuine surprise. Captain Mitchell ties Staff Sergeant Park for Day 2 lead with 9 hits each. The range fell silent. Tying the competition's best shooter while using iron sights against computer-controlled moving targets exceeded what anyone had expected. It was one thing to shoot static targets at known distances. It was entirely different to engage moving targets that required instant calculation and instinctive shooting. Commander Hayes shot next after Sarah. His SR-25 with advanced ballistic computer and tracking optics gave him every advantage. The computer calculated lead automatically based on target velocity. The scope's tracking feature allowed him to follow targets smoothly. He managed 9 hits, same as Sarah and Park. Excellent performance that demonstrated why he'd earned his reputation. Lieutenant Stone followed. His expensive rifle with integrated ballistics should have given him an edge. But something was wrong. His shots were rushed, hurried, like he was trying to prove something instead of just shooting well. He scored 8 hits. Good, professional, but not exceptional. His frustration was visible as he cleared his weapon and left the line. The remaining competitors shot through the morning. Results ranged from 5 to 9 hits. The moving targets were proving brutally difficult, even with advanced technology. By 1100 hours, the standings had shifted slightly. First place, Captain Sarah Mitchell, Staff Sergeant James Park, and Lieutenant Commander Marcus Hayes, all tied with 9 hits out of 10 possible. Fourth place, Lieutenant Derek Stone with 8 hits. During the lunch break, Sarah found a quiet spot near the equipment shed, opened her MRE without really tasting it. Her mind was already on tomorrow. Day 3. Whatever challenges Carson had planned. Hell of a performance out there, Captain. Hayes approached, his SR-25 slung across his back, expression thoughtful. That 9th target was nearly impossible. Maybe actually impossible. I missed it too on my run today. Sarah looked up. Hayes sat down beside her without asking. Not aggressive, just present. You practiced yesterday afternoon, though, Sarah said carefully. The familiarization sessions? Hayes looked at her sharply. Wait, you practiced yesterday too, right? They ran familiarization sessions from 1400 to 1700 hours. Sarah's expression darkened slightly. I wasn't informed there were practice sessions. Hayes's eyes widened, then hardened. That's not right. That's not just unfair. That's deliberate sabotage. Everyone should have been notified. Everyone should have had equal preparation time. He set down his water bottle, his voice taking on an edge. What else has gone wrong? Sarah hesitated, pride versus pragmatism warring inside her. Her father had always said pride was a sniper's worst enemy. It clouded judgment, got people killed in combat, made you stupid when you needed to be smart. Someone took 15 rounds from my ammunition last night, broke into my quarters while I was at the range. I found fresh scratches on my door lock. The ammunition box had been moved. 15 rounds missing. Did you report it? I documented everything, photographed the lock scratches, counted the remaining ammunition, written down exact times and observations. But I haven't filed a formal report yet. Hayes stood, his expression serious. Report it now, today. Before dinner formation. This isn't about special treatment, Sarah. This is about integrity. Tampering with a competitor's equipment and supplies is grounds for immediate disqualification and possible criminal charges. If someone's doing this to you, they need to be caught and stopped before it gets worse. I don't want to seem like I'm making excuses. It's not an excuse, it's a fact. Hayes's voice softened slightly. Look, I respect that you want to prove yourself on merit, that you don't want special treatment, but there's a difference between earning your place and allowing someone to cheat you out of what you've earned. He paused. You shot 9 out of 10 moving targets with iron sights and no practice time. That's not just impressive, that's borderline miraculous. You've already proven yourself. Now let the system work. Let Master Chief Carson investigate. Let whoever's doing this face consequences. Sarah considered his words, the logic, the truth that silence could be its own form of weakness. I'll report it to Master Chief Carson before 1700 hours. Good. Hayes returned to his rifle, then added quietly, that shooting this morning was some of the best I've ever seen. Iron sights against moving targets at 1,000 yards. Most people would say that's impossible. The fact that you hit 9 out of 10 without practice time, that's skill that can't be taught. That's instinct earned through years of discipline. Sarah looked at him, really looked, trying to understand why this man was different from the others, why he'd never seen her as a threat. My father never taught me to believe in impossible, she said. He taught me that impossible is what people say when they haven't trained hard enough. Hayes smiled, a genuine expression. I like that. Your father sounds like he was a hell of a Marine. That afternoon at 16:30 hours, Sarah reported everything to Master Chief Carson in his office. His face remained impassive as he took notes with meticulous care, writing down every detail, every observation. But his eyes showed cold fury that reminded Sarah why this man had earned the Navy Cross, why Marines had followed him into hell and trusted him to bring them back alive. 15 rounds missing from your ammunition supply, Carson repeated, his voice carefully controlled. Fresh scratches on your door lock indicating forced entry, and you were not notified about practice sessions that every other competitor attended. Yes, Master Chief. And you're reporting this now, a full day after discovering it because I didn't want to seem like I was making excuses, sir. Didn't want special treatment. Carson leaned back in his chair, studied her with those eyes that had seen too much combat. Captain Mitchell, let me be crystal clear about something. Reporting sabotage is not making excuses. It's reporting a crime. There is no universe in which stealing a competitor's ammunition and denying them practice time constitutes a fair competition. He stood, walked to the window overlooking the range. I'll have security review all barracks footage from the past 48 hours. I'll personally inspect your equipment and ammunition supplies going forward, and I'll ensure you receive notice of all future practice sessions and briefings. Thank you, Master Chief. Don't thank me, Captain. This is basic integrity, the minimum standard. He turned back to face her. But I will say this, you shot 9 out of 10 moving targets today with iron sights and 0 practice time. Your performance is not just competitive, it's exceptional. Your father would be proud. Sarah felt emotion welling up, but forced it down. Warriors didn't cry in their commander's office. There's something else you should know, Carson continued, his voice dropping lower, more personal. I haven't told you the full story about your father and me, about what happened in Desert Storm. Sarah's breath caught. Sir? Sit down, Captain. This might take a few minutes. Sarah sat. Carson returned to his desk but didn't sit. He stood looking at something beyond the walls of his office, seeing another time, another place. February 1991. Kuwait, Iraqi counteroffensive. We'd pushed them back across the border, but they weren't done. They hit us with everything they had left. Armor, artillery, infantry, and snipers. His voice took on the quality of someone reciting sacred text, remembering details that mattered. There was an Iraqi sniper somewhere in the oil fields. We never spotted him, never even saw muzzle flash. The smoke from the burning wells was too thick. But he'd been picking us off for 6 hours. Methodical, patient, professional. He'd killed 7 Marines that morning, wounded 4 more. Had us completely pinned. We couldn't move, couldn't evacuate the wounded, couldn't do anything but wait and die, one at a time. Carson's hands gripped the back of his chair, knuckles white. Your father was positioned on a ridge 800 yards from our position. We had no radio communication. He couldn't coordinate with us. He was operating completely independently. But through the smoke and heat shimmer, through visibility that made seeing impossible, he was watching, analyzing, hunting. Sarah leaned forward, riveted. 850 yards through smoke so thick we could barely see 50 meters. Your father put that Iraqi sniper down. One shot, iron sights, no laser rangefinder, no ballistic computer, no thermal optics to see through smoke, just skill and discipline and the fundamentals he'd mastered over 2 decades. Carson's voice roughened with emotion he usually kept buried. But he didn't stop there. He'd identified 11 more Iraqi soldiers attempting to flank our position, moving through the burning oil fields, trying to get behind us where they could finish off the entire unit with grenades and automatic weapons. Your father eliminated all 11 of them. 11 shots, 11 kills. Ranges from 400 to 900 yards through smoke so thick we couldn't see them. Through heat shimmer that made accurate shooting seem impossible. He met Sarah's eyes directly. Your father's shooting that day saved 37 Marines. I was one of them, 19 years old, combat correspondent, not even supposed to be in the fighting. But when the Iraqis attacked, everyone fought. I was certain I was going to die in that desert, certain my mother would get a telegram and a folded flag. Carson paused. Your father's skill was the difference between me standing here telling you this story and being a name on a memorial wall. His shooting was the difference between 37 families getting their sons back and 37 mothers crying at Arlington. Sarah felt tears threatening, but forced them back. He never told me details, just said Desert Storm was hell. The good ones carry it quiet, Carson said. But you need to know something else. Your father was recommended for the Silver Star that day. The paperwork was submitted properly. Witness statements collected from survivors. Everything documented according to regulations. But during the chaos after the war, during the massive drawdown and confusion that followed, the paperwork was lost, misfiled or destroyed in one of the equipment transfers. Your father never received his medal, never got the official recognition he earned for saving 37 American lives. He closed a folder on his desk carefully, like it was precious. I've spent the last 3 years tracking down surviving witnesses from that day, finding the men who were there, collecting their statements all over again, rebuilding the documentation from memory and fragments of records that survived. Carson opened his desk drawer, pulled out a small wooden case. Your father is finally going to receive his Silver Star. It's 33 years late, but justice delayed is not justice denied. There will be an award ceremony after this competition concludes. Regardless of where you place, you'll accept it on his behalf because you've earned that honor by carrying his legacy forward, by proving that the skills he mastered still matter. Sarah couldn't stop the tears now. They came hot and fast, mixing with the California heat on her face. Thank you, Master Chief. He would be so proud. Carson stood, placed his hand on her shoulder, a gesture that transcended rank, that spoke to something deeper, the bond between warriors who'd faced death and survived because someone else had the skill to keep them alive. Tomorrow is day 3. Weather forecast is calling for a storm, heavy rain, high winds. Your iron sights might actually give you an advantage when everyone else's electronics start failing. Get some rest. And Sarah, it was the first time he'd used her first name. Yes, Master Chief? Watch your back. Whoever's sabotaging you isn't going to stop just because you reported it. They're escalating. And people who feel threatened do desperate things. Day 3, the Tempest. The storm arrived at 03:30 with a violence that shook the barracks windows. Sarah woke to the sound of wind howling like something alive and angry. Through the glass, she could see palm trees bending at impossible angles, their fronds whipping frantically in gusts that would make precision shooting nearly impossible. Rain didn't fall, it attacked, driven horizontally by winds that the weather station would later clock at 32 miles per hour, with gusts exceeding 40. Any reasonable person would have canceled today's competition. But Master Chief Frank Carson wasn't a reasonable person. He was a warrior who'd survived Desert Storm and Somalia, who'd learned that combat didn't wait for perfect conditions, that the enemy didn't care if you were ready. By 0600, 13 competitors stood on the coastal firing range in full rain gear that was already soaked through. 2 had withdrawn overnight, an Army Ranger and an Air Force sniper. Both experienced warriors who recognized when conditions exceeded equipment capabilities. There was no shame in their decision, just pragmatism, understanding that some battles couldn't be won with the tools available. The range had been relocated overnight to a clifftop position overlooking the Pacific, where wind patterns were notoriously unpredictable. Eddies and gusts and sudden calms created by the interaction of ocean air and landmass. Invisible rivers of force that could push bullets off course by feet instead of inches. Sarah could taste salt on her lips, feel the wind trying to physically push her off balance. This was nature at its most hostile, conditions that separated warriors from shooters. Day 3, Carson's voice somehow boomed over the storm, cutting through wind and rain with the force of absolute authority. Today is about adaptation. Combat doesn't wait for perfect weather. Your enemy doesn't care if conditions are ideal. He attacks when he has advantage, when conditions favor him and hurt you. Today you prove you can perform when everything is against you. He gestured toward the targets barely visible through rain and mist that turned the world into shades of gray. Distances from 600 to 1,200 yards. 5 targets total. Variable wind conditions that will change not just between shots, but during flight time. Your equipment will be tested. Your skills will be tested. Most importantly, your mind will be tested. Your ability to adapt and overcome when every advantage has been stripped away. Sarah glanced down the line at her competition. Several shooters were already struggling before the competition even began. Rain hammered their advanced optics, creating condensation inside supposedly sealed scopes. Water droplets on external lenses distorted sight pictures, fogging that wouldn't clear no matter how much they wiped. Lieutenant Stone's expensive ballistic computer flickered and died as Sarah watched. Moisture had penetrated the waterproof casing. $15,000 of technology reduced to useless weight by water that didn't care about specifications or warranties or the engineer's promises. Commander Hayes stood stoic, his SR-25 wrapped in a waterproof rain cover, his expression unreadable. But Sarah could see tension in his shoulders. Even the best equipment struggled in conditions like these. Staff Sergeant Park looked frustrated, constantly adjusting his Night Force scope as water droplets created optical aberrations, refraction patterns that turned precision instruments into liability. And then there was Sarah, standing in the deluge with her father's M14 and its simple iron sights. No electronics to short circuit, no glass to fog, no batteries to fail in the moisture, no computers to crash when water found microscopic gaps in seals. Just steel and wood and fundamentals. The same tools warriors had used for generations before technology promised to make them obsolete. Due to weather conditions, Carson announced over the howling wind, anyone who wishes to withdraw can do so without penalty to their overall standing. Your Day 3 score will be recorded as your average from days 1 and 2. No one moved. 13 warriors remained, standing in rain that felt like nails, in wind that threatened to push them off their feet, because this was what they'd trained for. This was what separated them from everyone else. The ability to perform when conditions made performance seem impossible. Shooters will engage in alphabetical order. Lieutenant Briggs, you're first. Briggs was a SEAL with 3 combat deployments and a reputation for cold precision. His rifle was state-of-the-art. Yesterday it would have given him every advantage. Today it was betraying him with every shot. Through the spotting scope in the observation bunker, Sarah watched his first shot go wide by several feet. The ballistic computer, Struggling to calculate wind values that changed every second had given him catastrophically bad data. His second shot was closer, but still missed the target completely at 800 yards. By his fifth shot, struggling with electronics that kept crashing and restarting, he'd scored only 2 hits out of 5 possible. He stood from the line clearly frustrated, walked away shaking his head. A professional warrior defeated not by lack of skill, but by equipment that couldn't handle the conditions. The Storm was winning. Second shooter managed 3 hits. Third shooter, 1 hit. The Tempest was systematically stripping away technology's advantages, revealing the difference between warriors who could adapt and those who depended on tools that had failed them. "Captain Mitchell, you're up." Sarah moved to the line, her M14 slick with rain, but functioning perfectly. Every component made of materials that didn't care about water. Wood that had swollen slightly with moisture, but remained stable. Steel that was wet, but unaffected. Mechanisms that worked through simple physics that rain couldn't change. She assumed prone position, feeling cold water soak immediately through her uniform. The discomfort didn't matter. Pain was temporary. Performance was permanent. That's what her father had taught her in Montana winters, when fingers went numb and breath froze in the air. Through her iron sights, she could barely see the first target at 600 yards through the rain and mist. The world had turned into gradations of gray, shapes more imagined than seen. But visibility wasn't everything. Sometimes it was barely anything. Sarah closed her eyes, felt the wind against her face, against her hands, against every exposed part of her body. It came from the west, hard and steady, with the weight of ocean behind it, with a slight upward component as air hit the cliff face and was forced higher, creating thermal currents that would push bullets up and sideways in ways that no ballistic computer could accurately predict. Her father's voice echoed in memory, a lesson taught on a foggy morning in Montana when she was 14 years old, when he'd taken her hunting in conditions that made seeing impossible. When you can't see, you feel. The wind talks to you if you listen. The air has weight, it has texture, it has personality that changes moment to moment. Trust your senses. They're older than technology, older than civilization. Your ancestors hunted in darkness and fog for thousands of years before the first rifle was invented. Sarah opened her eyes, made calculations based on feel more than formulas. Wind 40 miles per hour from 270 degrees. At 600 yards, that meant she didn't calculate exact numbers. She felt it. The bullet would drift massively right without compensation. She aimed 3 feet left of the target, so far off that to anyone watching, it looked like she was aiming at nothing. Like she'd given up, like the pressure had finally broken her. She fired. 600 yards downrange, the bullet curved through the storm in a parabolic arc that looked impossible. Physics and ballistics and wind resistance all combining in ways that required more faith than calculation. The round punched dead center into the silhouette. Hit, center mass. Even the observation bunker had gone quiet. Sarah chambered her second round with mechanical precision. The second target was at 800 yards. The wind had shifted. She could feel the change, not see it, not calculate it from flags that were being torn apart by the gusts, but feel it on her skin. In her bones. Northwest now, stronger, maybe 45 miles per hour, with the upward component even more pronounced as the storm intensified. She adjusted her point of aim even further left and higher, compensating for wind and thermals that would push her bullet off course, trusting feel over formulas. Hit. The sensor confirmed what her body already knew. The shot had been perfect. Third target, 1,000 yards. The rain intensified into a gray wall that made seeing impossible. Vision became irrelevant. Sarah waited, breathing slowly, feeling for a lull in the wind, a momentary calm in the chaos. There, maybe 2 seconds. A brief window when the storm seemed to take a breath. When the horizontal rain eased slightly and the wind dropped from 45 to maybe 30 miles per hour, she fired immediately, trusting instinct over thought. Hit, fourth target, 1,200 yards, 3/4 of a mile through Pacific storm, the maximum effective range of her rifle, even in perfect conditions. In this tempest, it should have been impossible. Sarah's calculations became pure instinct. Years of training and thousands of rounds fired compressed into split-second decisions that bypassed conscious thought entirely. Lead left, compensate up and right, fire during the microsecond pause between gusts when the wind allows it. The M14 roared, recoil solid against her shoulder. Hit. Fifth and final target, 900 yards but positioned at an angle that created complex wind patterns. Currents swirling around the observation buildings, eddies formed by terrain features creating chaos that even the most sophisticated computers would struggle to model accurately. Sarah studied it for 10 full seconds, precious time that ate into her window, but she was reading information that couldn't be rushed, watching how the rain fell, how the mist moved at different elevations, understanding that wind wasn't one thing. It was layers, streams at different altitudes and velocities, rivers of force flowing over and around obstacles in ways that created pockets of calm and zones of violence. She aimed what seemed like 5 feet from the target, so far off course that several observers thought she'd made a catastrophic error, that the pressure had finally overwhelmed her judgment. Sarah squeezed the trigger one final time. The bullet curved through space and storm, following a path that looked impossible, but was actually inevitable. Physics expressed through skill earned over decades of discipline. Hit. 5 for 5. Perfect score for Captain Mitchell in storm conditions. The competitors watching from the observation bunker fell silent. Even Stone, who'd been skeptical and hostile from the beginning, stood with his mouth slightly open, staring at the target verification display like it showed something that violated the fundamental laws of nature. Commander Hayes had been preparing for his own run, checking his equipment, reviewing his notes. But he stopped, set down his rifle, walked to the edge of the bunker where he could see Sarah emerging from the shooting position through the rain. Water dripped from her uniform, streamed down her face. Her hair was plastered to her head, but her expression showed only calm focus, like she'd just completed a routine training exercise instead of something that would be discussed in sniper schools for decades. Hayes approached as she entered the bunker, dripping in cold. "That was supernatural, Captain." He paused, searching for words adequate to capture what he'd witnessed. "You couldn't even see the targets clearly. How did you do that?" Sarah wrung water from her sleeves, her voice matter-of-fact, like she was explaining basic mathematics instead of performing what most shooters would consider magic. "Sometimes you don't need to see everything. You just need to feel what matters. Wind isn't invisible. It has weight, temperature, patterns. If you pay attention, if you've trained yourself to read the information that's always there." Hayes shook his head slowly, a mixture of admiration and something close to awe. "I've got a computer that costs taxpayers $15,000. It has algorithms developed by MIT engineers, processing power that can perform millions of calculations per second. And it can't tell me what the wind is doing because the conditions change faster than it can adapt. You're doing it by feel, by instinct, by skills that don't require batteries or processors. Computers are great tools, sir, until they're not. When they fail, you need to know the fundamentals. Otherwise, you're just carrying expensive weight that can't help you." The competition continued through the morning. Hayes managed 3 hits out of 5, an impressive performance given the conditions. His experience and adaptability allowing him to overcome some of his equipment's limitations, but nowhere near Sarah's perfection. Park struggled with fogged optics, condensation that wouldn't clear, creating refraction patterns that made accurate aiming impossible. He scored only 2 hits. A professional warrior brought low by technology that promised advantages but delivered vulnerability. Stone's dead computer left him essentially shooting blind. He attempted all 5 shots but couldn't compensate for wind he couldn't measure. Scored 0 hits, stood from the line looking like he'd been personally betrayed by the rifle that had cost more than a new car. The remaining shooters fared even worse. Some couldn't see their targets at all through rain-soaked optics. Others fired, hoping their computers would somehow pull miracles from chaos. Technology that was supposed to give them advantages had become liability in conditions that didn't care about engineering promises. By noon, when Carson finally called a halt to the competition as the storm reached truly dangerous levels, the standings had shifted dramatically. First place, Captain Sarah Mitchell, perfect score in impossible conditions, leading by a margin that seemed insurmountable. Second place, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Hayes, professional performance despite equipment limitations. Third place, Staff Sergeant James Park, solid shooting hampered by technology failures. Fourth place tied, multiple competitors including Lieutenant Derek Stone, struggling to adapt when their tools failed them. As competitors filed out of the observation bunker toward vehicles that would take them back to dry buildings, several approached Sarah. Their skepticism had evaporated like steam, replaced by something that looked like respect, even reverence. Captain Anderson, the Army Ranger who'd been polite but doubtful from the beginning, extended his hand. His grip was firm, genuine. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology, a serious one. I didn't think you belonged here. Thought this was political correctness compromising excellence. I was completely wrong. That shooting was beyond anything I've ever witnessed. You didn't just compete with us. You dominated in conditions that defeated everyone else. I'm honored to have watched you work." "No apology necessary, Captain. You just didn't know what I was capable of. Now you do." Others followed with similar acknowledgments, quiet nods, requests to learn techniques. The tide had turned completely. Sarah was no longer the outsider being tested. She was the standard, the competitor everyone else was chasing, the embodiment of something they'd forgotten in their rush to embrace technology. But not everyone was pleased. Lieutenant Stone stormed past without a word, his face dark with anger that went beyond professional frustration. This was personal now. His expensive equipment had failed. His assumptions about technology superiority had been shattered. And watching from the command post through rain-streaked windows, Commander Robert Kane scowled at the scoreboard, his arms crossed, his expression showing fury that transcended competition. This wasn't about scores anymore. It was about worldviews being challenged, about beliefs being proven wrong, about everything he'd built his career on crumbling like wet sand. Hayes noticed Kane's expression, moved close to Sarah as they walked toward the transport vehicles. "Watch out for Kane, he's escalating. I've seen that look before, in combat, when men feel cornered, when everything they believed is being proven wrong. They get desperate, they get dangerous. I can't control what he does, sir. I can only control what I do." "I know. Just be careful. Keep your equipment secure, your ammunition locked. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is." Sarah nodded, but her mind was already on tomorrow. Day 4, night shooting. The challenge that would test her in ways the storm hadn't. Because shooting in darkness with iron sights seemed less like a challenge and more like an impossibility. But her father had taught her that impossible was just another word for something that required more discipline, more fundamentals, more trust in skills that didn't need light to work. Tomorrow she would prove it. Tonight she would prepare. Day 4, darkness falls. The sun set over the Pacific at 1930 hours, painting the sky in blood reds that faded to deep purple before surrendering completely to black. Full darkness descended like a curtain falling. No moon, cloud cover blocking the stars. The kind of primal darkness that city dwellers never experienced. Complete and absolute. Sarah stood on the night firing range at 1945, watching as the other competitors checked their equipment. Thermal imaging scopes glowed with faint electronic light. Night vision devices cast eerie green illumination on the faces of men who wore them. Laser rangefinders with infrared capabilities were tested and retested, electronics humming with power. Every shooter had technology specifically designed for darkness, equipment that turned night into day, that made targets visible as clearly as noon, that gave them every possible advantage. Every shooter except Sarah. Her M14 had no mounting rails for night vision, no thermal capability, no electronic aids whatsoever. In the darkness, she was as blind as any soldier from her father's generation, relying on eyes that nature had designed for daylight, not for hunting in the dark. Day 4 tests your ability to operate in denied environments. Master Chief Carson's voice carried across the range through speakers positioned around the course. Night combat. No ambient light beyond starlight, which tonight is blocked by cloud cover. Targets at ranges from 400 to 1,200 yards. Hostage situations. You'll see silhouettes, some hostile, some civilian. You must identify friend from foe. Engage threats. Preserve innocent lives. He paused to let that sink in. Shoot a hostage and you're disqualified immediately. No second chances. No appeals. Hesitate too long and the scenario counts the hostage as killed by the enemy. You'll have 3 seconds per scenario to assess and engage. 8 scenarios total. Sarah's stomach tightened. This wasn't just about shooting anymore. It was about judgment, about life and death decisions compressed into heartbeats, about moral calculations made when you could barely see. Captain Mitchell. Carson's voice carried careful neutrality, professional distance. You're aware your equipment lacks night vision capability. Yes, Master Chief. You're authorized to withdraw from tonight's competition without penalty. Your Day 4 score would be calculated as your average from previous days. Given your performance so far, that would still maintain your lead. Every eye turned toward her. In the darkness, Sarah could feel their gazes, even if she couldn't see faces clearly. Some probably hopeful she'd quit. Others curious to see if she'd actually attempt this impossible task. Ma'am, Hayes's voice came from nearby, concerned, almost pleading. This isn't like the storm. In daylight, you could at least see the targets even if conditions were terrible. In this darkness, with iron sights, it's not just difficult, it's nearly impossible. Maybe actually impossible. Nearly impossible, Commander. Not completely impossible. Even I'm going to struggle tonight, and I've got $20,000 worth of night vision equipment. Computer-assisted target acquisition. Thermal imaging that shows heat signatures through complete darkness. You'll be shooting blind, literally blind. Not blind, just shooting differently. Sarah's mind drifted to Montana, to a memory she'd buried because it hurt too much. Because remembering made the loss feel fresh. She was 19 years old, home on leave from basic training. Her father had been different that visit, quieter, more deliberate, like he knew something she didn't, like he was trying to teach her everything before time ran out. He'd taken her to the mountains at midnight, no moon, clouds covering what few stars might have been visible. Turn off your flashlight, he'd said. Dad, I can't see anything. It's completely black. Not yet. Give your eyes time. Let them adjust. Human eyes are better than you think. We've just forgotten how to use them. We've let technology make us dependent, make us weak. They'd waited in silence for 30 minutes, her father patient and still, Sarah fidgeting and frustrated. But gradually, impossibly, the darkness had revealed itself, not as daylight, but as gradations of shadow, shapes emerging from nothing, movement becoming visible. The night wasn't pure black, it was dark gray, charcoal, tints of silver from starlight that penetrated the clouds in places. Can you see? Her father had whispered, and she could. Not clearly, not perfectly, but enough. 6 months later, he was dead. Afghanistan. IED. The last lesson he'd taught her in those mountains became sacred, became something she carried like the rifle, like the memory, like the grief that never quite faded. "I'm shooting, Master Chief." Carson nodded once, accepting her decision without argument. "Shooters will engage in reverse order of current standings. Captain Mitchell, you're last tonight. You'll shoot at approximately 2200 hours. That gave her 2.5 hours to watch others perform, to study the scenarios, but most importantly to let her eyes adapt to complete darkness. Sarah found a position at the back of the observation area, away from any light sources. She closed her eyes for 10 full minutes, then opened them slowly, letting her pupils dilate fully, letting rod cells in her retinas adjust to darkness. Ancient mechanisms that predator species had used for millions of years before humans invented fire or tools. Hayes went first. His night vision equipment allowed him to identify and engage targets with impressive accuracy. She watched his performance on the monitors that showed thermal camera feeds of the scenarios. Professional, competent. He completed 8 scenarios successfully, missing only 2 where the lighting conditions were especially poor and targets appeared at maximum range. Park managed 6 successful scenarios, solid performance demonstrating his skill. But he'd hesitated on 2 shots. That moment of doubt resulting in simulated hostage deaths that would have been real casualties in combat. Stone managed only 4 scenarios. His equipment worked perfectly, but his judgment was compromised by anger. Maybe by the need to prove something after being embarrassed by obsolete iron sights and a woman who'd made his $50,000 technology look like expensive decoration. As each shooter performed, Sarah studied everything she could, where targets appeared, patterns in their placement even though positions were supposedly random, timing sequences that might indicate computer algorithms. Most importantly, she let her eyes continue adapting. 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes of progressive darkness adaptation, her pupils dilating fully, taking in every photon of available light. Rod cells becoming hypersensitive, the ancient systems that let humans hunt at dawn and dusk, awakening fully for the first time in her modern life. "Captain Mitchell, you're up." Sarah walked to the firing line at 21:47 hours. Her M14 felt heavier than usual. Or perhaps that was just the weight of impossibility pressing down on her shoulders. She assumed her position, loaded her rifle, waited for the first scenario. The range lights that had been providing minimal ambient illumination died completely. Absolute darkness descended, the kind of darkness that made you question if your eyes were even open. Sarah closed her eyes for 10 full seconds, then opened them slowly. The world wasn't black anymore. It was deep gray with hints of definition. She could see the outline of the scenario area, the vague shapes of building facades used for the hostage situations, the rectangular frames where targets would appear. "Scenario 1, the range officer's voice announced from speakers. 3 silhouettes at 600 yards. 2 hostile, 1 civilian. Identify and engage. Time starts now." 3 shapes materialized in the darkness, barely visible, more suggestion than substance, like shapes seen through fog or heavy smoke. Sarah's mind processed information at lightning speed that felt slower than heartbeats. The leftmost shape held something angular, a rifle judging by the projection, the way it caught what minimal light existed. Center shape had hands raised, no weapon visible, defensive posture. Rightmost shape had weapons shouldered, aggressive stance, ready to fire. Left target first. It was turning to aim at something, maybe her, maybe the civilian. Sarah aligned her iron sights using muscle memory more than vision, leading slightly for the target's movement. She couldn't see her sights clearly, could barely see the target, but she knew where everything was, felt it more than saw it. She fired. Hit confirmed by the electronic sensor. Green light barely visible in the darkness. Right target immediately. Before it could engage the hostage, before it could fire on her, she shifted aim. Fired. Hit. 2 seconds had elapsed. The hostage remained standing, unharmed. Scenario 1 complete. No casualties. Sarah allowed herself one slow breath before the next scenario loaded. Scenario 2 appeared at 800 yards. Even darker area. 4 silhouettes this time. 3 civilians, 1 hostile. The hostile was crouched behind a civilian, using the innocent as a shield. Sarah waited, watching for movement, for any indication of position or intent. Patterns that would reveal who was a threat. The hostile shifted slightly, exposing his shoulder and head for a fraction of a second. A sliver of vulnerability that required perfect timing and perfect aim. She fired into that narrow space. Hit. Hostage unharmed. Scenario 3. 5 silhouettes at 1,000 yards. Sarah could barely see them as anything more than dark spots against slightly lighter background. Movement. Shapes. But no details. No way to identify weapons or postures clearly. She watched for 2 full seconds, burning time but gathering information, seeing patterns in how shapes moved, how they related to each other spatially, building a mental picture from fragments. 2 hostiles, 3 civilians. She identified targets, engaged, 2 shots, 2 hits, civilians safe. Scenarios 4 through 7 blurred together. Sarah had entered a state beyond conscious thought. Her shooting had become pure instinct, eyes processing the minimal light available, mind calculating angles and distances, hands moving the rifle before her brain fully registered the decisions being made. She was operating on a level that transcended technique or technology, accessing something primal and perfect, the same state her father had achieved at Firebase Viper when conscious thought would have been too slow, when instinct was the only thing fast enough to save lives. Scenario 8. The range officer's voice carried unusual gravity. Target at 1,200 yards, hostage situation, low light conditions, partial obstruction, time starts now. Sarah strained her eyes into the darkness. 1,200 yards, nearly 3/4 of a mile in near total darkness. She could barely see the scenario area, just the faintest suggestion of vertical shapes against slightly lighter background. Then she saw it. Movement. The smallest shift in shadow density. A hostile silhouette behind a hostage. Positioned so any shot risked hitting the innocent. Standard tactics. Coward's tactics. But effective. Her father's voice echoed in memory. A lesson that went beyond technique or mechanics. Beyond anything that could be taught in a classroom. Sometimes you don't shoot what you see. You shoot what you know is there. Trust the fundamentals. Trust your training. Trust that if you do everything right, the bullet will go where it needs to go, even if you can't see it. Sarah couldn't see the target clearly enough to aim conventionally, but she'd watched 8 other shooters attempt this scenario. She knew where the hostile had to be positioned based on the scenario's geometry. She understood the angles, the spacing, the mathematical certainty of where a threat would stand to use a hostage as shield most effectively. She aimed at empty darkness, trusting mathematics over vision, trusting training over sight, trusting fundamentals that had kept warriors alive for millennia before night vision and thermal imaging. She fired into blackness. 3 heartbeats, silence. The kind of silence that preceded either vindication or catastrophic failure. Then the sensor light illuminated, green, confirming the impossible. Hit confirmed, hostage secure, scenario 8 complete. The range erupted. Even competitors who'd been skeptical all week were standing now, voices raised in disbelief and admiration, staring at the darkness where Sarah had just accomplished something that shouldn't have been possible. That violated every assumption about what human capability could achieve without technology. Sarah stood, cleared her weapon, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. She just shot a target she couldn't see at a distance that required faith more than skill, and succeeded. Hayes was the first to reach her as she entered the observation bunker. his expression showing something between admiration and disbelief. "That last shot, Sarah," he paused, struggled to find words. "You couldn't even see the target. How?" "I didn't need to see it, sir. I knew where it had to be. Mathematics, geometry, understanding that some truths exist whether you can see them or not. Perfect score, 8 scenarios, 8 successful completions, 0 hostage casualties." Master Chief Carson's voice boomed across the range with something that sounded almost like pride. "Captain Mitchell extends her lead with performance that will be studied and discussed for generations." The scoreboard updated in the observation bunker. First place, Captain Sarah Mitchell, leading by a margin that now seemed absolutely insurmountable. Second place, Commander Marcus Hayes, professional performance but unable to match Sarah's perfection. Third place, Staff Sergeant James Park, falling further behind but still competitive for bronze. Fourth place, Lieutenant Derek Stone, equipment failures and judgment errors dropping him out of medal contention. As competitors dispersed into the night, Carson approached Sarah privately, his weathered face showing rare satisfaction, maybe even joy. "Tomorrow is the final day. Live fire urban combat simulation. Most complex scenario we've ever designed. Multiple threats. Split-second decisions under maximum stress. The culmination of everything we've tested this week. I'll be ready, Master Chief." "I know you will." Carson paused, then added quietly, "Commander Kane submitted a formal complaint tonight, claims your performance is statistically impossible without technological aid. He's demanding a comprehensive equipment inspection, suggesting you're using hidden electronics, night vision contacts, something he can't see but that explains what his worldview can't accept." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Let him inspect everything I own, sir. He won't find anything because there's nothing to find." I told him the same thing, but watch your back tomorrow. This is his last chance to stop you. And a man who feels his entire belief system collapsing does desperate things, dangerous things. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow was the final day, the last test. After that, the competition would be over. Her father would receive his silver star, and she would have proven that fundamentals still mattered. But something felt wrong, a nagging sense that the worst was yet to come. She got up, checked her equipment for the 10th time. Her ammunition was secured. Her rifle was locked. Everything was as it should be, but the feeling wouldn't go away. Day 5. Sabotage escalates. Sarah's hands trembled at 0300 hours from a discovery she'd made in the pre-dawn darkness. Alone in her barracks, she'd inspected her ammunition for the final competition and found that nearly half the cartridges had been tampered with, damaged casings showing tool marks, improperly seated primers that would cause misfires, powder loads that felt wrong when she weighed them carefully on her portable scale, some too light, some too heavy, creating dangerous pressure variations that could jam her rifle or even cause catastrophic failure. This wasn't just competition sabotage anymore. This was potentially life-threatening. Someone had replaced her carefully prepared rounds with sabotaged ammunition that could misfire, jam her rifle at a critical moment, even cause a barrel obstruction that might injure her or those nearby. She reported it immediately to Master Chief Carson, waking him at 0315 with a phone call. He arrived at her barracks within 5 minutes, examined the evidence, launched an investigation, and provided her with fresh ammunition from the armory's most secured stock. But time had been against her. Barely enough time to inspect the new rounds, verify they were safe, no time to practice with them, no time to verify they matched her rifle's unique characteristics. Every weapon had its preferences, its personality. Ammunition that worked perfectly in one rifle might group differently in another. And now at 0600, standing in the staging area for the final challenge, Sarah's hands still shook slightly from adrenaline and anger. Day 5. Carson's voice boomed across the range. Final competition, live fire urban combat simulation. You'll navigate a mock city environment with multiple buildings, civilians, hostiles, high-value targets, everything designed to test what you've learned this week. He gestured toward the elaborate training facility, a small city constructed from shipping containers and plywood. Buildings with multiple floors, alleyways, elevated positions, danger areas, a maze designed to simulate hostile territory. Scenarios include close quarters battle, long-range precision shots, moral judgment calls, equipment failures, unexpected threats, time pressure, everything designed to test not just your shooting, but your judgment under maximum stress. Carson continued, course completion time is 60 minutes maximum. Fail to complete within that window, and you're disqualified. Shoot a civilian anywhere in the course, immediate disqualification. Fail to eliminate a high-value target, major point deduction. This tests everything: shooting, tactics, judgment, adaptability, mental toughness. His eyes found Sarah's across the assembled competitors. Due to sabotage discovered this morning involving tampering with Captain Mitchell's ammunition, she's been provided fresh rounds from secured stock. I'm stating this publicly so everyone understands. Someone in this competition or supporting this competition has crossed a line from competitive advantage to criminal action. That person will be found and prosecuted to the fullest extent of military and civilian law. Every competitor turned to stare. Sabotage, criminal action. The words hung in the air like an accusation looking for a target. Stone's face showed shock, genuine surprise maybe, or maybe just good acting, hard to read. But Kane, Commander Robert Kane, stood at the back of the group, his face pale, his eyes showing something between fear and defiance. Shooters will engage in alphabetical order. Captain Anderson, first. Staff Sergeant Park, second. Captain Mitchell, third. Sarah watched the first two shooters carefully. Anderson completed 6 of 10 scenarios successfully. Professional performance, but nothing exceptional. Park managed 7 completions, but had hesitated on a critical hostage rescue. The simulated civilian had died. He exited the course visibly shaken. A warrior defeated not by lack of skill, but by hesitation at a critical moment. Captain Mitchell, you're up. Sarah stepped to the entry point, her M14 loaded with the replacement ammunition, her heart rate controlled through breathing techniques, her mind clear and focused despite the sabotage, despite the danger, despite everything working against her. The buzzer sounded. She entered the urban maze. Immediately her training took over. Movement techniques learned at Quantico and refined through years of practice. She moved along walls, using cover, rifle at ready position, scanning for threats, creating angles that gave her advantage, clearing corners with precision that had become unconscious. The first scenario appeared without warning. 2 hostiles at 40 yards in a simulated market area. Civilians scattered throughout, running, panicking, creating chaos and confusion. Sarah identified the threats instantly, distinguished them from innocents by their weapons, by their postures, by the aggressive intent written in their body language. 2 shots, center mass, 2 hostiles down, civilians unharmed. She moved forward, clearing the area, checking for additional threats. The discipline of never assuming the obvious was everything. The second scenario was more complex. A building interior, multiple rooms, various distances, threats that could appear anywhere. Sarah cleared each room with precision, using techniques that had been drilled into her until they became reflex. Close quarters shooting at 10 yards in a hallway, tight space, no room for error, 1 shot, hostile down. Then a sudden long-range target appearing at a window 300 yards distant, visible for maybe 2 seconds. Sarah dropped to one knee, acquired the target through her iron sights, calculated the minimal drop at that range, fired, hit. Scenario 3. Rooftop sniper at 800 yards. Partially concealed behind concrete barriers. The target was barely visible, just a sliver of silhouette showing. The kind of shot that required perfect wind reading and perfect execution. Sarah calculated the angle, the slight breeze coming off the Pacific, the morning sun just starting to warm the air and create subtle thermal currents. Adjusted for everything her training had taught her. Squeezed the trigger. The target dropped. Then, at Scenario 4, disaster struck exactly as someone had planned. Sarah chambered a new round and felt the bolt resist. Sluggish. Not quite right. She pulled the trigger on a hostile threat at 200 yards. The rifle jammed. The cartridge had failed to seat properly, stopping halfway into the chamber. One of the replacement rounds. Some microscopic defect that turned reliable ammunition into liability at the worst possible moment. Exactly when she was most vulnerable. Time didn't stop for malfunctions. The threat remained active. Simulated civilians were in danger. The scenario clock was running. Every second of delay counted against her. Sarah's hands moved with practiced speed that looked superhuman, but was actually the result of 10,000 repetitions. Muscle memory taking over when conscious thought would be too slow. Pull charging handle, lock bolt to rear, strip magazine, inspect chamber. A mangled cartridge was stuck in the throat. She used her cleaning rod section from her tactical vest to drive it out. Inspected the chamber for damage. None visible. The rifle was still functional. Reloaded with a fresh magazine. Chambered a new round. Reacquired the target that had been waiting patiently like this was real combat. 28 seconds. Most shooters would have panicked, failed, given up under the pressure. Sarah fired. Hit. She continued through the course, her confidence growing with each completed scenario. The damaged ammunition had cost her precious time, but she adapted. Checked each round before chambering it, discarded 2 more suspicious cartridges, shot with what remained. Trusted her training over the equipment that had been sabotaged. Scenario 7 was the ultimate technical challenge. 3 hostage takers at 1,000 yards, positioned in different windows of a 3-story building. Obscured positions, low contrast against the building's dark interior, and the hostages were clearly visible, making any error potentially lethal to innocents. Sarah found a shooting position that gave her optimal angle. Through her iron sights, the targets were barely distinguishable from shadows. But she'd spent 4 days learning to shoot what she could barely see, trusting instinct and mathematics over visual confirmation. First target, left window, 2nd floor. She aimed, compensated for distance and elevation. The slight breeze that would push her bullet right. Fired, hit. Second target, right window, 3rd floor, higher elevation, slightly different wind exposure due to building effects. Adjust, fire, hit. Third target, center window, 1st floor, the most obscured position. The hostage was directly in front of the threat. No room for error. 1 inch wrong and an innocent died. Sarah waited, watching for movement. Patient, disciplined, the kind of patience that separated snipers from mere shooters. There, the hostile shifted slightly, exposing a narrow angle of vulnerability, maybe 6 inches of target, a shot that required absolute precision at 1,000 yards with iron sights through morning haze. She fired into that impossibly small space. Hit. Hostage safe. The final 3 scenarios tested judgment more than marksmanship. Ambiguous situations where threats weren't clearly defined. Split-second decisions that meant the difference between saving lives and taking innocent ones. The kind of moral calculations that warriors carried forever. A figure with a weapon. But was it pointed threateningly or being surrendered? Sarah held fire for 1 crucial second, saw the weapon lower, hands go up in surrender, moved past without engaging. Correct. It was a civilian who'd picked up a fallen weapon in panic. Shooting would have been murder. 2 figures struggling in close combat, one hostile, one friendly. Impossible to distinguish in the chaos. Sarah couldn't risk the shot from this angle. She moved quickly to a better position. Flanking. Creating an angle where she could identify the threat by tactical gear. Eliminated him with one shot without harming the civilian he'd been attacking. The final scenario was deceptively simple. A single hostile at 600 yards. Exposed position. Clear shot. Easy by any standard. The kind of shot she could make in her sleep. But something felt wrong. Sarah's instincts screamed warning. Years of training that taught her to question the obvious, to look for the trap in what seemed straightforward. She studied the situation for several seconds, burning time but gathering information. There, a wire, barely visible against the ground, running from the hostile's position to a nearby building where civilians sheltered. A trap. Shooting the hostile would trigger an explosive device that would kill innocents. The scenario was testing whether she would think before shooting, whether she had the discipline to see beyond the obvious target. Sarah redirected her aim to the wire itself, a target barely thicker than a pencil at 600 yards, the kind of shot that existed in theory but rarely in practice, the kind of shot that required perfection. Her father's voice whispered in memory one final time. Sometimes the hardest shot is the one that saves lives without taking one. Sarah's breath stilled. Her heart slowed through conscious control. The world narrowed to that single, thin line stretched across space, barely visible, impossibly small, but there. She fired. The wire severed, sparking as the bullet cut through metal. The trap neutralized. Civilians saved. Then she eliminated the hostile with her next shot. One kill, but more importantly, multiple lives saved. The exit buzzer sounded. Sarah emerged from the urban environment, her uniform soaked with sweat despite the cool morning. Her rifle's barrel still warm from firing, but her face showed calm focus, like she just completed routine training instead of something that would become legendary. Master Chief Carson stood at the exit with stopwatch and tablet, his expression unreadable until she got close. Time, 42 minutes, 16 seconds. Scenarios completed, 10 of 10. Civilian casualties, 0. High-value targets eliminated, all confirmed. Equipment malfunction overcome in 28 seconds. Carson looked up from his tablet, met Sarah's eyes. Perfect score, Captain Mitchell. Despite criminal sabotage designed to make you fail, you've just completed the most difficult combat simulation in naval special warfare history without a single error. The assembled competitors fell silent. Then Hayes started a slow clap that others gradually joined. Even Park, who'd lost to her consistently, nodded with grudging respect and genuine admiration. But Sarah barely heard the applause. Her eyes were fixed on Commander Robert Kane, who stood at the back of the group, his face twisted with barely contained rage. He'd tried to sabotage her, tried to make her fail, tried to prove she didn't belong. And she'd beaten his sabotage along with everything else, proven that fundamentals could overcome even deliberate attempts to destroy them. Carson's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Commander Kane, report to my office immediately. Military police are waiting with evidence. Security footage, fingerprint analysis. You're under arrest for multiple violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice and civilian criminal statutes. Kane's face went pale, the rage draining away like water from a broken dam, leaving only shock and the realization that his career was over, ended by his own actions. As military police approached to take him into custody, Sarah's voice stopped them, stopped everyone. Commander Kane. Kane turned, his eyes showing something that might have been shame or defiance or both mixed together. I'm sorry about your son, sir. Master Chief Carson told me. Iraq, 2006. I'm truly sorry for your loss. Kane's face cracked, the rage and defiance evaporating, leaving only grief that had twisted into something toxic. I thought if I could prove the old ways don't work, if I could show that lowering standards kills warriors, maybe it would make sense why Brian died. Maybe it would mean something. Sarah stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm, full of compassion but also truth. The old ways didn't fail your son, sir. Bad leadership did. Training shortcuts did. Political decisions made by people who never served. But not fundamentals, not discipline, not the values that make warriors. She paused. Honor him by fixing that, by teaching the next generation that excellence has no shortcuts, that fundamentals matter more than politics or quotas or anything else, that warriors are made by their will, not their equipment. Kane's eyes glistened with tears. He nodded once, unable to speak. Then the M-Peace led him away, a tragic figure destroyed by grief that had been allowed to become rage, by loss that had never been properly healed. That afternoon, Master Chief Carson gathered all remaining competitors for final standings and announcements. This has been the most challenging competition in Naval Special Warfare Command history. You've been tested in ways that revealed not just your skills, but your character, your adaptability, your ability to perform when every advantage is stripped away. He looked at the assembled warriors with genuine pride. But this year, something extraordinary happened. We witnessed a warrior prove that fundamentals outlast fashion, that discipline defeats dependency, that the person makes the weapon deadly, not the other way around. Carson pulled out the final scoreboard. Third place, with consistently strong performance across all 5 days, Staff Sergeant James Park, United States Marine Corps. Park stepped forward, accepted his award with professional grace. Second place, demonstrating tactical excellence and consistent high-level performance under impossible conditions. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Hayes, United States Navy, Naval Special Warfare Command. Hayes stood, shook Carson's hand, then turned and caught Sarah's eye, smiled with genuine friendship and respect. No resentment, just admiration. In first place, Carson's voice grew stronger, won by a margin that removes all doubt. Perfect scores on days 1, 3, 4, and 5, leading performance on day 2. All of this despite equipment sabotage, denied practice time, stolen ammunition, and criminal attempts to force failure. Sarah stood, her heart pounding. The first woman to not only compete in, but completely dominate the Naval Special Warfare Advanced Sniper Competition. Captain Sarah Mitchell, United States Marine Corps. The assembly erupted. Not polite applause, thunderous recognition from warriors who understood exactly what she'd accomplished, what she'd overcome, what she'd proven. Sarah walked to the platform, saluted Master Chief Carson, accepted the trophy, a bronze statue of a sniper in prone position. Outstanding performance, Captain. You've made history this week, changed minds, proven truths that some had forgotten. Thank you, sir. I was honoring what my father taught me, that actions speak louder than words, that excuses don't matter, only results. But Carson wasn't finished. He stepped forward, carrying something Sarah hadn't expected, a folded American flag in a small wooden case. Captain Mitchell, there's one more ceremony, one more honor that's 33 years overdue. He opened the case. Inside, gleaming against blue velvet, lay a Silver Star medal. Your father, Colonel David Mitchell, served with extraordinary distinction during Desert Storm. February 1991, Kuwait, Republic of Iraq. During the Iraqi counteroffensive, your father demonstrated valor above and beyond the call of duty. Sarah's breath caught. The entire assembly went silent. An Iraqi sniper had pinned down American forces, killing Marines methodically, breaking their will. Your father, positioned 800 yards away through smoke and heat shimmer, eliminated that sniper at 850 yards. One shot, iron sights, perfect execution under impossible conditions. Carson's voice grew thick with emotion. Then he identified 11 more enemy soldiers attempting to flank American positions. Eliminated all of them, ranges from 400 to 900 yards, through visibility that made shooting nearly impossible. Saved 37 American lives that day. He paused. Let the weight of that number sink in. I was one of those 37 Marines. Your father's skill was the difference between me standing here and being a name on a memorial wall. Carson's voice broke slightly, the first time Sarah had seen him lose composure. Your father was recommended for the Silver Star, but paperwork was lost during the chaos after the war. He never received his medal, never got the recognition he earned. Carson opened his desk drawer, his hands steady despite the emotion. On behalf of the United States Marine Corps and a grateful nation, it is my honor to present your father's Silver Star. 33 years late, but no less deserved. And it is my privilege to place it in the hands of his daughter, who has proven that his legacy of excellence continues, that his teachings still produce warriors, that fundamentals still matter. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as Carson pinned the medal to the flag, placed both in her hands. The weight of it, not physical but emotional, nearly buckled her knees. He taught you well, Sarah. You shot exactly the same way he did, with instinct, with heart, with fundamentals that outlast technology. And like him, you prove that warriors aren't made by their equipment. They're made by their will, their discipline, their refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible. The applause that followed was different, deeper, more reverent. These warriors understood they were witnessing something beyond competition results. This was legacy, honor, history, justice delayed but finally delivered. 6 months later, Sarah stood in her new office at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center. Her father's Silver Star sat on her desk beside her trophy. Tomorrow she'd begin training her first class of students, teaching them what her father had taught her, that fundamentals outlasted fashion, that discipline defeated dependency, that warriors were made by their will, not their weapons. The classroom had 24 students, 22 male, 2 female, all waiting to learn from the woman who'd beaten Navy SEALs with a rifle and iron sights. Sarah stood at the whiteboard, ballistics formulas written in neat rows. Wind drift calculation, she began. Range in hundreds of yards, multiply by wind miles per hour, divide by constant for caliber. A young SEAL raised his hand. Ma'am, my scope has a computer that calculates all this automatically. Sarah's expression didn't change. Patient, understanding. And when that computer dies in a sandstorm, when batteries fail at 20 below zero, when electromagnetic pulse kills all electronics, she paused, let the question hang. Fundamentals don't need batteries. Discipline doesn't need technology. That's why we learn this, because when everything fails, and it will fail, skill is all you have left. Stone sat in the back row, now a staff sergeant, taking notes, a humbled student learning from the woman who'd proven him wrong. That evening, Hayes entered Sarah's office. Hell of a class today, Captain. Thank you, sir. They worked in comfortable silence, the ritual of weapons maintenance connecting all warriors across time and service. There's something else, Hayes said, his voice taking on a quality she hadn't heard before. Personal, vulnerable. I had a younger brother, Tommy. He wanted to be a Marine like our old man, Korea veteran, tough as nails. But Tommy had asthma, disqualified medically before he even got to MEPS. Broke his heart in a way I don't think ever healed. Hayes's hands stilled on his rifle. He became a teacher instead, high school history, taught kids about the wars he couldn't fight in, the warriors he wanted to become but couldn't. He was good at it, made history come alive for them. His voice dropped lower. He died last year, lung cancer. Ironic, given the asthma that kept him out might have saved him from burn pits that killed others. Before he passed, we talked about regret, about roads not taken. He told me he'd spent his whole life wondering if he had what Dad had, If he could have been a warrior if given the chance. The not knowing haunted him. Haze met her eyes. When I watch you refuse to quit despite sabotage, despite broken equipment, despite everyone expecting failure, I see what Tommy could have been if he'd gotten his chance. You're not shooting just for yourself, Sarah. You're shooting for everyone who believes fundamentals still matter. For everyone told they don't belong, who proved they do anyway. Sarah felt the weight of his words, the responsibility they carried. Your brother sounds like he was a good man, sir. He was, and he'd be proud to know what you're proving. That warriors aren't defined by gender or politics. They're defined by heart, by discipline, by refusing to accept limits that others try to impose. Hayes stood, extended his hand. Joint Task Force deployment, 6 months overseas. Advisory role training Allied forces in fundamentals, mountain warfare, electronic denial areas where high-tech fails and old-school skills matter. I'm team leader. Need a senior sniper instructor, someone who can teach what you've demonstrated this week. When do we deploy, sir? 4 weeks. Gives you time to settle into your instructor role here first. Develop training curriculum. Begin teaching the next generation. Sarah shook his hand, the grip of equals, of warriors who tested each other and found mutual respect. I'll be ready. 1 week later, Sarah stood in her classroom. The morning sun streamed through windows overlooking the Pacific. Her students sat at attention. She held up her father's M14. This rifle is 60 years old. No computer, no laser, no thermal imaging. Just steel and wood and fundamentals that haven't changed since humans first learned to hunt. She paused. Let them see it. Really see it. With this rifle, I beat every advanced weapon system the United States military could field. Not because the rifle is special, but because fundamentals outlast technology. Because discipline defeats dependency. Because the warrior makes the weapon deadly, not the other way around. Sarah set the rifle on her desk beside the Silver Star. Your equipment will fail. Your computers will crash. Your batteries will die. When that happens, fundamentals are all you have left. So we're going to learn them, master them, until they become as natural as breathing. Until you can shoot in darkness, in storms, in conditions where your technology is useless and your skill is everything. She looked at each student. Excellence doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to exist. Your job is to become so good that when your equipment fails, you don't. When conditions are impossible, you adapt. When everyone expects you to quit, you prove them wrong. Sarah picked up chalk, turned to the whiteboard. Now, let's talk about wind drift calculations, because one day your life might depend on doing this math in your head while bullets are flying and your computer is dead. 24 students leaned forward, ready to learn, ready to prove that fundamentals still mattered. And in the corner of the room, barely visible but always present, stood the ghost of a father who taught his daughter that warriors weren't made by their weapons. They were made by their will, their discipline, their refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. The old ways never died. They just waited for someone worthy to carry them forward. And Sarah Mitchell was ready.